Good afternoon. Welcome to those joining us in the gallery today, and welcome to those joining us on our Zoom platform, including now Deputy Mayor Kathleen Waxer. We'll take this opportunity to thank Councillor Ralph Melnick for his duties as Deputy Mayor for the last 2 months, and welcome Councillor Waxer to that role. I begin today by indicating that the municipality of Jasper respectfully acknowledges that the municipality of Jasper is on Treaty 6 and 8 territories, as well as the Jasper House Métis District. This land is the traditional territory meeting ground, gathering place, traveling route, and home for the Danza, Assiniwatchee Winawak, Assiniwatchee Niha, Nihayawak, Anishinaabe, Secwepemc, Stoney Nakoda, Mountain Métis, and Métis. And I draw from that an acknowledgement also of the local individuals who presented to us April 16th and on the weekend honored missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls by a red dress display, both on Sunday, May 7th, the official day of recognition of the law. Patricia, and also previously a small display brought to our attention by Councillor Melnick along Cabin Creek within the town site. And I did have an opportunity to attend both, and I have to say that the small display along the side of Cabin Creek was particularly moving. Small dresses on a tree surrounded by painted rocks with names and very brief particulars. And I happened to be there in the company of a couple of young local girls who were fully engaged in explaining to me what they understood and asking questions. And as I say, it was quite a moving experience, and I thank Councillor Melnick for bringing it to our attention. Councillors, you have today's proposed agenda. Are there any additions, deletions, other changes to be made to the agenda? Councillor Demota.
Yes, if I may, just after maybe just under, I would like to maybe move new business master plan down and like move all of them down by one, and maybe just start 6 by 1, just to have a line item called communications. I just want to have a brief discussion after our presentation from the Accurate Assessment Group on some of our communications that we might want to consider for the community coming forward when it comes down to our tax bills and things like that.
Thank you. Councillor Demota, you want to add as a discussion item under new business? Is that?
Yeah, so 6.1 and then just move everything down respectively, 6.1 to 6.2, and then transit services standards policy becomes 6.4. Just to keep things in flow of, because if I put it at the end, then it'll just be too far after the conversation, after the assessment discussion.
I will leave the question of adding it to the will of council, but I wonder whether you considered whether you might add it as notice of motion to be considered at the next committee of the whole. There is an opportunity for councillors to get matters on the agenda. This is not it, but I mean, I appreciate that it's council's agenda. They can certainly willingly add it if they wish. it just seems to me it's a deep discussion and no one is particularly prepared for this.
How do you know?
Well,
I'm just kidding. Sorry, no, that's fine. I will take that recommendation and I will move that to 7.1 in notice of motion and we can have a broader discussion about it next week. I might not have the opportunity to be here, so but I will take that. We'll go with today's.
are there any other suggested changes to today's agenda? Right, I will take that as a motion from Councillor Demoda to add agenda item 7.1 as a motion with respect to communications. Is there any debate on that motion? All those in favor? There are none opposed. That is carried. And may I have a motion then to approve the agenda for today's meeting as amended? Councillor Keller-Grampy, thank you for that. All those in favor? There are none opposed. That is carried. We have before us today 3 sets of minutes for approval, beginning with the regular meeting minutes of April 16th. Are there any errors, omissions, or corrections required to be made to those minutes? Seeing nothing, may I have a motion, please, to approve the minutes of the April 16, 2024 regular council meeting as presented? Councillor Keller-Grampy, thank you. All those in favor? There are none opposed. That's carried. Councillor. Oh, yes, sorry, Councillor, no.
Thank you. Thank you, Your Worship. We've approved the minutes, which is appropriate, but questions arising from the minutes. Correspondence with Minister Jason Nixon. We indicated that there may be more news regarding the core needs income threshold for Jasper before the end of April. I'm wondering if administration has heard anything from the government regarding that change in the CNIT.
Mr. Kidd.
Thank you, Your Worship. I can say that we've been hitting the refresh button on the Government of Alberta website, but they haven't yet released the 2024 CNIT numbers. I guess they're based on 2023 data. So know that information hasn't come out yet, but administration is keeping a close watch.
Thank you for that. Agenda item 3.2 then, we move to the minutes of the Committee of the Whole meeting of April 23rd, 2024. Are there any errors, omissions, or corrections required to be made to those minutes? And if not, may I have a motion, please, that council approve the minutes of the April 23rd, 2024 Committee of the Whole meeting as presented? Thank you, Councillor Melnick. All those in favor? There are none opposed. That is carried. Finally, we have before us the minutes of the special council meeting of April 30th, 2024. Are there any errors, omissions, or corrections required to be made to those minutes? Again, if not, may I have a motion, please, that council approve the minutes of the April 30, 2024 special council meeting as presented? Councillor Waxer, Deputy Mayor Waxer. Thank you very much. All those in favor? There are none opposed. That is carried. That takes us to agenda item 4, correspondence. We have in the agenda package a request from Tourism Jasper regarding the Jasper destination stewardship plan. Oh, we do have a representative from Tourism Jasper. Rushton, welcome.
Hello, yeah, thanks for having me here. sorry, just snuck in at the last minute, so you haven't seen him. Yeah, I can walk through this if that is better than reading on the screens. But yeah, following the endorsement of the stewardship plan back in November of last year, we've been kind of hitting the ground running, trying to figure out how I want to start this process and support some of the ongoing initiatives that are already happening with this plan. And one of the biggest things that came to mind was that we need to really establish a baseline understanding of where we're kind of at in a lot of the initiatives and assess that current state. And a lot of that is done through establishing baseline metrics. So one thing that we'd like to go forward with is to do a sustainability certification as kind of a first step. And there's many of those out there. We did a big review of them. And the one that we stumbled upon and came to the conclusion on was called Green Step. So actually out of Kelowna, it's a Canadian based certification that uses global standards on sustainable tourism. So we're coming to council with a request on data sharing. So a lot of that stuff we have access to, and a lot of that data that we will need is from municipal government level as well. So I don't have the full data request. I'm still waiting to hear back from the Green Step team on that. But some of those would be like water usage, our waste data, energy usage, social and community indicators. But yeah, that's kind of what we're coming forward with in terms of the destination stewardship plan. It would really just allow us to have a baseline understanding of where we're at and then go forward and see progress over time. If you have any questions on any of that, I'm happy to answer.
Thank you very much for that presentation, Ms. Rushton. Are there any questions from councillors? Councillor Melnick.
Thank you, Your Worship. Welcome and thank you. The Green Step Destination Certification, I took the opportunity to click down and take a look at what's involved. And I see there's a variety of fees that would be applicable. As part of the municipality's participation, would we be then subject to those fees, or are those fees going to be taken care of by Tourism Jasper?
Yeah, so we'll fully cover all those fees, so no financial commitment from the municipality on that.
Any other questions, Councillor Wilson?
So once certified, what do you see as some of the benefits to being part of the certification program?
Yeah, so this one in particular, I think in the letter, it talks about the different certification levels. So they have 4 different levels that would allow us every 3 years, we have to recertify if we want to maintain that certification. So it allows you to track progress over time in the certain different indicators and categories that they have. And normally they're across environmental, social, cultural, and then economic sustainability indicators. So that's one thing. So you can kind of see where our weaknesses are, and secondly, how we're progressing over time. And the second thing that's really interesting about Green Step that I liked compared to the other certification bodies is that they not only have a destination certification, but also a business certification body. So that's something that we're exploring as well, is when we go through the process as a destination, how can we also support the business community to go through that process in their own operations? So that's the one thing that I could see as a really great thing. And the nice thing as well is that they have a team on the ground that can come to Jasper. They're close by. So actually Pursuit has gone through the business certification with all of their properties right now. So that's something that's already going on in the business community. So it's kind of getting a little bit more well known.
Thank you for that. In the absence of other I'm sorry, Councillor Hall.
Thank you, Mayor Ireland, and thank you, Ms. Rushton, for coming today. I guess my question is for administration, this ask, is it something that we can do?
Your Worship, for Councillor Hall. So without seeing the details of the data, administration certainly is open to sharing anything that, as long as it was at a community-wide level, rather than anything that could provide personally identifiable information. And I'm sure that would be the intent. I think we'd like to have the opportunity to go through the data request to identify if there's data that's required that we don't currently collect. because there may be some costs associated with collecting data that's information that weren't previously collected. So I think the next step would probably be for administration and the Tourism Jasper to sit down, review the data points that they need information on. And if there were no costs and if there was the ability to just move forward, administration can certainly do that. I think we'd like the chance to report back if there were gaps in the data that we're currently collecting that might entail some additional spending or cost associated with capturing it. So probably refer to administration for a report back would allow us to at least, do that review with Tourism Jasper and then close the loop with council.
Thank you for that, Mr. Gibbon, and thank you for the question, Councillor Hall. I do note that the request is to share available data. So I didn't read that as a request to manufacture data that we don't already have. I appreciate cost, but just to share available data to the extent that it doesn't breach any privacy concerns and residents. I would be inclined to be prepared to direct that now and then also work with Tourism Jasper to see what else might be made of it. If it's not all there. If administration needs more time, I certainly do that, but I appreciate the request, and it's a request as I read to share available data. I don't want you to do extra work or have staff do extra work. Share what we can. I take it that administration would benefit from a motion directing administration, so prepared with a motion. Councillor Melnick?
Thank you, Your Worship. We'll make an attempt at this. I would like to move that council direct administration to work with Tourism Jasper regarding their request for support for the destination stewardship plan's implementation, to provide information and data as requested to support the Green Step destination certification.
Might I ask a friendly amendment to include the word available there?
Available is thus inserted into the motion.
Thank you for that motion. Councillor Melnick, is there any debate? Not, I will call the question. All those in favor? There are none opposed. That is carried. Again, thank you very much, Ms. Russian, for the presentation. Before you leave, Councillor DeMotta.
Well, I was just hoping with this whole sustainability thing that, there might address some of the conversations revolving around a zero footprint transportation, whatever that might look like. And I think that just because part of our aligned values that are addressed even within the plan itself, it does talk about having some ecological transportation within the park in itself. And I know it's kind of a hot topic in our community now, but I think having some matrix and information about that and how that might help visitors in the community and the planet as a whole, because we are in a national park, and I think those initiatives are important to talk about zero emissions when it comes to our visitors and people living here in the community and the benefits from those. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor DeMotta. Again, thank you, Ms. Russian.
Thank you all.
We turn now to agenda item 5, delegations. I would invite our assessor from Accurate Assessment Group Limited, Mr. Hurdles, forward.
Very good, thank you.
Just before you begin, Mr. Turtles, I want to take this opportunity as we introduce this agenda topic, just to mention to our administration through Mr. Gibbon, a matter that has been brought to my attention by another councillor relating to quality control on our agendas, and I appreciate that. People are all human and things can get missed and mistakes can be made. This is the second time in as many weeks that at the last minute there have been changes to material on our published agenda. It is unfair to councillors who might be inclined to read their agenda as soon as it comes out, and there are corrections made later than for that topic, doubles their workload. But apart from councillors, it's also unfair to the public who would be interested in seeing the agenda. Again, as we saw last week, last minute changes that weren't even available to council until presentation, and this week, a change yesterday to documents. And again, while I appreciate that mistakes can be made and can be accepted and forgiven, as a municipality, it seems to me that we should hold ourselves to a very high standard. The public expects that of us, we should expect it of ourselves. And so, if you might, I wonder whether you would simply address what steps might be taken to ensure that council and the public don't see any increase, and in fact see a diminishment in changes to the agenda at the very last minute.
Yeah, thanks very much, Your Worship. I'm comfortable speaking to that. Certainly, we appreciate exactly as you said, the public's reliance on the information that's presented, and not everybody goes back through to check for updates. We also appreciate the council has a very short period of time to be able to review information before being asked to make decisions. So we place a lot of importance on ensuring that the right information goes out. On behalf of the rest of the team, I'll say that we put a high standard and a high level of importance in ensuring we get the right information out. Two very significant presentations and pieces of information over the last little while. So I absolutely don't feel bad about having acknowledged that, that we missed the mark in making those available to the public. In both those cases, I will say that they are information provided by third parties. So it really falls to myself, ultimately to myself, in terms of reviewing agendas and sort of hitting the OK button before they're published. I would note on behalf of the rest of the team that the published agendas are published on time all the time, but that quality control ultimately does come down to me. And so, Your Worship and Council, my apologies for that, those errors over the last couple of meetings, and you can be assured that I will ensure that attachments that are coming through from third parties meet the same standard of quality control that we're applying to our council RFDs that are generated in-house.
Thank you for that, Mr. Gibbon. Subject to any other comments from other councillors, either now or later, I welcome the delegation from Accurate Assessments, and we're here and you're here, and we're happy to receive your presentation. Thank you for it. I'm sure Councillor Moore.
Thank you. Just before we move forward, for clarification, I apologize if I missed it. So if there are people looking at it right now on the information package on our municipal website, that is current. Got the new one on there. Okay.
Yes, Your Worship, that's correct.
Thank you for that clarification, Councillor Moore. So, Mr. Burns, over to you.
Very good. Thank you very much for having us here today. First of all, I would like to make sure everyone in the room realizes that the error was my fault. It was not anything that administration done. It was an oversight on the report that I originally sent. And Unfortunately, it was only yesterday that I realized that it was the wrong report. It was actually last year's report that was forwarded. Again, my apologies. We are looking at the current information in front of us now, so hopefully I can answer any questions that anybody has. If there were questions arose from the report that was sent in error, I apologize, but again, hopefully we can understand. Thanks. First of all, you all know who I am. You've seen me before. Troy Burtles is my name. I'm your appointed assessor. I introduced to you my son Tyler last year, who is currently enrolled in Lakeland College in the appraisal and assessment program. He just finished his first year, and we've got him back on the team as a summer student, helping out again. Got him doing a few more duties that most summer students don't get the ability to have. I'm not sure if he's got an in with his boss or something, but at any rate, he's happy to be part of the team and doing really good. So today, again, the purpose of the meeting is to explain to you what happened to your assessment base year over year, give you a comparison of the changes, speak a little bit about assessment shifting and what that means for you when you set your tax rates. And I want to talk a little bit about the assessment complaints that have been filed on the current assessment. I'm not going to dwell a whole bunch about our client base. You've seen these maps before. Head over through this one. I am going to stop on. I do every time. I just want to reiterate that I want to be looked at as your trusted advisor for all things assessment. Anybody in this room has any questions about assessment, I want you to feel comfortable. You can come to me. I can answer anything you need to know, whether it's in a setting like today or an email or a phone call for them. One small thing I want to note about this slide, we have added staff. Last year, we hired 2 students at a Lakeland College, and the reason why I'm telling you about this is because it's part of our succession plan. None of us are getting younger, and one day some of us are going to want to retire, and I just want you to be comfortable that we are filling the shoes to bring people up and have everybody covered from an assessment perspective. So Levi Stewart has been added to our team. We added another gentleman that works on the industrial assessment side, and he's working out really good. Hopefully next year we can add Tyler officially to this chart. Okay, so this graph breaks down your total assessment base by category. Right out of the gates, you can see that we have increases on both your residential and non-residential assessment base. If both of those numbers to the right were the same, that would mean essentially there wouldn't be tax shifting. In other words, the increase or decrease to the residential base would be the same as it would be to the non-residential base. As you can see, the non-res base increased quite a bit more than the residential assessment base. So if we just look at the residential numbers, the increase of 7% is due primarily to market growth. Now, there has been a little bit of new construction, so that's built into this as well. Typically in Jasper, we don't see a ton of new construction year over year. We always see a little bit. This year we had the Cabin Creek townhomes being condominiumized and separate. So that moved from multifamily to residential, still residential in nature. As well, we had new apartment building being built and a few other things that have helped increase that number a little bit. In speaking to ratepayers in the last couple of months, a lot of them are surprised that the residential base increased due to market. And, you know, my answer is always the same. Jasper, we're not impacted by the negative effects of oil and gas as the rest of the province is. It's people want to live in Jasper and will pay money to do it. And they'll pay more money this year than they did last year. That's a reality. I haven't seen a time where it's gone a year and people pay less money for property in Jasper, even through COVID. So it's something that we see and the land title transactions confirm it and that's the result of the increase into the residential side. As far as the non-residential side goes, as we are all aware, the hotel sector in Jasper is a huge part of the non-res pie. Through COVID, the revenues at the hotel accommodation properties were reduced significantly. And because we are assessed based on the income approach, that impacted their property value and assessment. Now coming out of COVID, with some significant time under our belts, those revenues have rebounded significantly. So that's the primary reason why the hotel portion of the non-res space increased. I'll get into that a little bit more in detail in a bit too. The industrial assessment, that's the designated industrial property. There's a couple of properties in town, the plant outside of town, those are assessed by the province. Insignificant increases there. But overall, your total base increased by 11%. Next couple of slides, I just prepare for you to show you in a pie format what your assessment base is broken down into. As you can see, the majority of your base is residential in nature. That stands to reason, but a very significant part of it is non-res. And then this chart gives you an idea. This is, you can see what I'm talking about here with regards to increase in value year over year. On the residential side, the blue lines, it's every year has had an increase. And that's, like I said, because every year people pay more money for their property. On the yellow line, however, there's some periods of times where they go up and down, and the hotels are far more susceptible to changing market due to economic conditions than restaurants and offices and retail stores. So that yellow, if you were to draw a line across the tops of all the yellow bars, you would see some ups and downs, but generally over time, it does increase. This is just your total assessment base. Again, pretty straightforward. It increases year over year. So if we break down your taxable assessments by percent change, you'll see that the majority are in the up to 10%. There's some that increased more than 10%. Generally, those are properties that might have been in construction last year and now are completed. Definitely the 25 to 100% is that case. So the example would be you started building a home in October, as of December 31st, which is our physical characteristics date. Maybe that it was a shell, and then come the following year it's completed and added to the assessment as fully complete. Well, that would be like the case where it would increase by 100% or 50% or whatever the case would be. And then this just is another way to show that. So the vast majority of your properties are in the 1 to 10% increase. Same information by dollar change. So that 1 to 10%, would be equivalent to your 25,000 to 100,000. You can see here again, the majority of the properties were in that range. Bar graph them. Then this slide gives us a visual representation of the change. The darker the red, the higher the dollar change. Sometimes you'll see an area where it's, say, light red. So for example, Cabin Creek. It's primarily in that $25,000 to $100,000 range, but there's a couple of properties that are more than 100,000, and it's really comes down to, in that case, it comes down to the magnitude of the property itself. Percentage wise, it would be similar, but dollar wise, it happened to fall outside of that 10%, so it shows darker. And again, all the new construction, everything would be a darker color in this case. A few years ago, administration asked me to add this. It essentially is just a distribution of the residential assessed values by assessment. So you can see a big, in the 400,000 to 600,000, these would be your 1940s vintage, getting older, still worth a significant amount of money, but not as much as the newer builds. 6 to 8 and 8 to 1 million, that would be primarily, you know, the newer, the little bit, when I say newer than 1940s, but newer homes, say even in the Cabin Creek area. And now we're getting into the 1 to 1.2 million down in the Cabin Creek area as well. You know, it wasn't that long ago where we didn't see sales that were more than $1 million in Jasper. Now it's very common. And that just speaks to the higher price people pay over time. And some people that I speak with, ratepayers in Jasper, you know, are alarmed. My house is 40 years old and it's assessed at $1 million plus. Like, are you sure? And, you know, after I go through the comparables that have sold that are similar, they commonly say, "Oh my goodness, I didn't realize that." But reality is market values have increased significantly over time. And if you get, as you get to the far right of this chart, the 1.8 and up, those are basically your Lake Edith properties, where the land itself is worth $1.5 million. And then here's the same idea on the non-res side. So 0 to 500,000, that number is all of your home accommodations. So for example, I have $1 million assessment and you have a couple of private home accommodations. There's a portion of your assessment is non-residential. It might be between 5 and 10% of the total. Well, that would be in that first 190 properties. Everything else is your, you know, Patricia, retail and restaurants. And as you get to the far right, it's basically your hotels. Couple of just pieces of information for you. I always speak to new parcels each year. You can see 2019, we had 66 new ones, and then for the next 3 years, it was quite limited. And then again in 2023, we had 25. Those are both the same scenario where a previous one property was subdivided into several condominiumized properties. It's not that we added 25 new homes or new properties, it's that one was split into 25. And then development permits, we work with Parks Canada to collect all the permit information, and numbers are on par there as well. So to give a breakdown of assessment change by area, you know, it's all pretty consistent. Stone Mountain was a bit of a drop this year, and if you were to look closely on that heat map that I showed you, you could see that Stone Mountain was actually a light blue. It's because the assessments there went down. Why did they go down? Because the numbers of sales that we had and what the sales prices told us that the assessments needed to come up. It's rare, but there's enough sales within Stone Mountain alone to be able to value them individually each year, which is nice. Mount Park Co-ops, again, a very small increase, but as we all know, the price that those properties can sell for is limited in the CPI changes year over year. Lake Edith, a couple percent increase. Limited sales out there, but we do have 1 or 2 a year, and it helps get where we need to go. Overall, again, 111% or 11% increase year over year. So this chart here, there's a lot of information. It is really what directs us how to assess each area of the municipality. The middle set of data, the median ASR for the current assessment, is based on the comparison of the sale price and the assessment So if a property is assessed at 100, they're at $1 million, and it sells for $1 million, the assessment divided by the sale price is 1 or 100%. It's assessed at $1 million and it sells for 1.1 million, then that ratio is 91%. Okay, so as we know, the legislation says our median assessment to sale ratio needs to be between 95 and 105%. So when I break it down by area of the municipality, as long as I'm within that 95 to 105 for each area, I know that the total is going to be between there. And that's what audit reviews the quality of my assessment on. So as you can see, every one of those falls within that range. Now, if we look at the far right column, this gives me an indication of where we're going for next year's assessment. And usually, well, we're May now, so I only have, from land titles, I only have up to April market data. So there's still May, June, and July sales to come in, and that's what we'll be using for next year's. But as it sits right now, we're the overall ASR is 98.7 in both cases. So what that tells me is that we're not going to see as much of an increase next year as we did this year, with the caveat that we still have 3 months of sales and the valuation date is July 1st. So technically we could have sales come in May, June, and July that are substantially higher than the rest of the year. And then that would ultimately impact the total assessment base for next year. Lots of information on that page there. And so earlier I showed you that Stone Mountain, you're at 99%. Well, if you look at Stone Mountain after July 1st, you can see that there were 4 sales and I'm sitting at 97.7 as compared to the overall mean of 98.7. So that indicates that there will be an increase. Okay, so shifting. I mentioned earlier that the hotels are a significant portion of your non-residential base. As we know, that the assessment for non-res properties is based on the income approach. I was having a discussion with Tyler earlier that the income approach doesn't mean how many hamburgers you sell if you're a restaurant or how many t-shirts you sell if you're retail. It's how much does the real estate generate. So it's, for example, there's a 2,500 square foot store on Connaught that rents for $40 a square foot. Property owner generates that as rental income. That's the income that the income approach relies on. However, there are properties that the real estate is the income. There is the business. A hotel, golf course. Without the real estate, you don't have the business, so we have to assess the business income. So on a hotel property, we go through the motions, we calculate what the net operating income is based on their revenues. And then at the end, we remove a business value amount of that. And that's the number that we capitalize. So as we move past COVID, time goes by, people are visiting Jasper more regularly. Their incomes year over year are far greater than they were through the COVID times. So that ultimate net operating income is higher. Therefore, the values have gone up a lot. Like we're talking 20%-ish on the hotels. So you might have caught earlier, and if I would have given you the correct report, you would have caught it prior to yesterday, but the total increase in the non-res assessment base, we're looking at about 106 million. Well, 87 of that is just in your hotels. So it's significant. Again, speaking to the retail and office buildings is what I explained. It's not based on the amount of hamburgers they sell. It's based on the rental income. There was an increase in that part of it as well. So the balance of that, so we're talking 19 million or so is applied to the other part of the non-res base. And that's because we have had a sale or two over the last couple of years that's indicated our assessments need to be increased to match that market value. And so we see the increase there. So what does that really mean? Because the non-residential base went up by 15 and the hotels is about 20%. That means the non-hotel part is less than 15, you're gonna have a shift in assessment base within your non-res class. And you as a municipality don't have the ability to set a separate tax rate for hotels and retail. That's a limitation in the municipal government act. So you are going to have shifting within that class. And then as we talk about residential as compared to the non-res, well, the total non-res is up by more than double of what the residential is, so you do have the ability to change your tax rates to mitigate that shifting, but that's up to you guys how to determine to do that. Assessment complaints, as we all know, our ratepayers have the ability to file a complaint if they disagree. Complaint is, sounds like a bad thing, but it's really not. It's somebody who believes that their assessment is too high because it does translate into tax impact for them, right? So we have a few different ways to help your ratepayers. First, my phone is on every day, all day. If there's a ratepayer that needs to talk about their assessment, they have the ability to contact me via administration. We also have an open house that we come to Jasper and speak. I think I had 3 visitors this year, which kind of surprised me a little bit, being that we still increased, and I was hearing that, people didn't feel their property values went up, they thought it went down. However, that's good. And then after all of that, if they're still unsatisfied, they can file the assessment complaint. So on the non-residential side, most property owners are represented by tax agents. So I don't deal directly with the owner of Pursuit, for example. I'll deal with their consultant. So overall, we had 4 residential complaints filed this year and 11 non-residential. Of those 4 residential to date, 3 of them have been withdrawn, and 1 of them will go to hearing, just based on a conversation I had with the property owner and some information that they essentially want to discuss, and that's fine. And then all 11 complaints are filed by 1 tax agent. So it commonly in my world, we'll get to the second last or even the last day of the 60-day complaint period, and we won't have any complaints filed. And then around 4 o'clock on the last day, we're flooded with complaints. So I always say, why did you guys do that? Why didn't you just phone me and we can discuss it? Well, we ran out of time. So it is what it is. I can only try to get them to communicate with me so much. At the end of the day, 11 complaints were filed by 1 agent. And if you did the math on what their requested assessment is versus what the actual assessment is, there's $52 million of assessment in programs. That's a lot. But I'm confident that there won't be $52 million worth of assessment lost. So
I'm sorry, Mr. Burrows, I
absolutely,
interrupt, Councillor Melnick wanted to get in that question.
100%.
Thank you very much, Your Worship. And so I've been following in real time and also have been following the report from last year. And this is the one particular page where you mentioned the $52 million. Last year, we had 4 non-residential complaints seeking $5.8 million. So this is a significant difference. And I think in the non-residential, we're coming off the 3-year averaging 50% of the most recent year for
50, 30, 20, yeah.
Yeah. So obviously it's become more pronounced now because we've come out of COVID and people have had higher revenue. Hence, now they're coming back looking for that variance, I guess, or assessment challenge. Would that be a fair way of assessing?
Absolutely. That's exactly the scenario. So just to elaborate a little bit on the 50, 30, 20, what that means is for hotel properties in Jasper, rather than taking the current year of income and capitalizing that to an assessment, we weighted over the last 3 years. We put 50% of the weight on the most current year and 30 and then 20 and weight the 3 years income. And the reason why we do that is excuse me, exactly because of things like COVID. If we used 1 year only, we would have a zero assessment on half your hotels because they lost money in COVID. So with the 50-30-20, we blended out, and then on a year like last year where their incomes rebounded and more, if we only used 1 year, we would have from zero assessment to 20 million in some cases, right? Like it just, the spikes, the peaks and valleys would be so unpredictable for property owners to estimate what the taxes are. It just is problematic over time. So in the industry, 50-30-20 weighting has been generally accepted. And the agent community agrees and are able to work with it that way as well. So if you look at the 3 years this year and the 3 years last year, COVID was a huge part of the last year's number. Now they slide off the 3 years, or the 1 year does anyways, and we add a new year. So we're taking off a year that has virtually no income and we're adding a year that has a ton of income. That's why we see a 20% increase in the hotel assessments. And understandably, you're a property owner of a hotel and your assessment went up by 20%, you're gonna have questions. It just worked out this year that only one agent that represents a significant amount of hotels in town, they filed on all, the properties that they filed on are more than just hotels. It was absolutely every property that they represent. So when I speak to them, I say, do you really have issues? And their answer is, no, we just don't have time to review it. So now that the process has started, it'll force us to review some. Earlier today, I touched base with the agent and tried to find out where are we, can we meet to discuss this because we need to get this dealt with. And at the end of the day, if the agent says, no, we think you're wrong, and I say, no, I think I'm right, well, then we go to hearing on 11 properties, but I really don't think that's gonna happen. I'm predicting a question might be, how much do you think would lose? And it's tough. It's tough to say. I think it would be wrong to say zero. It'll be zero loss on some properties. But until I can fully understand what their arguments are, it's really tough to say. Will it be 52 million? No, I'm confident I can say that. Yeah. I have discussed with administration a little bit more detail of how much I really think it is. And, when you come into your tax rate setting time, it's really up to you and administration whether you want to consider that there's potential loss in assessment. I do recommend that you do consider something. I don't recommend zero, and I don't recommend 52 million. That's between you and me. That helped answer your question.
It does. Thank you very much for that, Mr. Burles. But I just want to ask one thing about a few slides earlier. You don't have to go back to it. It talked about two different codes, code 206 and 202.
Yeah.
And how does that relate? What do those two codes mean? Because it was in relation to 49 million, this is last year, 49 million of the $100 million increase to assessment codes 202 and 206 were from the hotel sector. And this year, that number is 87 million of the 106 million were in those two codes. And I think for the councillors and the public, understanding what is assessment code 202 and 206.
Excellent question. So in Jasper, the majority of your properties are within the Jasper town site, and then there's some outlying accommodations that throughout the winter don't get the same level of service. And so the municipality has two separate assessment codes. So 202 is commercial non-res, and 206 is rural non-res. You have a lower tax rate that gets applied to the code 206. So those properties are Jasper Park Lodge, where the assessment of it can change by 30 or 40 million in a year. And all of the bungalow properties, Pyramid Lake, all of those are in that 206 code. Hotels like Sawridge and Whistler, all those are under the code 202, as are all the restaurants and offices, retail. So It, 206 is your rural non-res that you collect lower taxes per dollar than the 202.
Great, thank you very much for that, and thank you for allowing me to interrupt the presentation.
Absolutely. So moving forward, this here is just a quick map of our re-inspection cycle. I and I are going to be doing some work this afternoon on the area labeled 2024. All the residential properties within this area will be mailed a residential request for information letter from us, where they have the option to fill it out by hand and return it by mail, or we give them the option to go online and fill it out, or they have the option to do nothing with it. It's up to them. The legislation holds the same teeth for residential properties as non-residential properties. So in essence, if a residential ratepayer doesn't fill it out, and then in the following year wanted to file an assessment complaint, technically it could be dismissed because they didn't fulfill the requirement of the legislation to provide all the information. And that has been imposed on the non-residential side. I've yet to impose that on the residential side. There's lots of reasons why somebody might not do it. And some of those reasons might be, I'm 80 and I don't have email and I don't know what this means and I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to react negatively with regards to the legislation in that case. But on the other hand, hotel property that doesn't submit their information that's requested and then goes and files an assessment complaint, absolutely, I will be forcing the legislative teeth on that. That's happened. And it has happened, and it has happened in this municipality. Yeah. So, lastly, question?
Just on that, I'm curious, if a residential person didn't fill it out, then would you just the property on the highest value within that, so if the property was built in the 40s, then whatever you were charging the other properties, you would assess that property, or how would you do that?
Really, the intent of the letter is to collect information specific to that property. So a home built in the 40s, obviously at some point there's been some kind of renovation to it. We may be aware of it, we might not be aware of it, and the renovation might be minimal, but it might be significant. And what we're trying to do is find a way to collect that information without being intrusive to the property. You know, drive by, oh, this property looks like it's renovated. The last thing I want to do is knock on their door and say, hey, I need to walk through your home. Right, so this is just a means to collect that information. Now, if they don't submit that data and we go to the property and we realize that there's been significant improvements or renovations, then we do need to capture that in the assessment. So our other options are to estimate. I don't know how good you guys are at estimating, but assessors are notoriously bad for estimating high. Just kidding. So lastly, next steps, it's pretty straightforward. We had the open house I spoke about earlier in March. I always enjoy coming here and giving the presentation to council. I find that you folks always have great questions that really relate to assessment. I can't tell you how many times I go to a council presentation where I see the councillor doing one of these, and am that boring? And yes, I am, but I can speak about this stuff all day long sometimes. But at the end of the day, our objective is to have the right number on the assessment roll so that you folks have the ability to generate your income, your property tax revenues as you should. Any other questions?
Thank you, Mr. Brittles. I'll turn first to Councillor Wilson and then Councillor Demona.
Yeah, thank you for that. It's always very interesting every year. I'm not sleeping for sure. Couple questions. You answered a few of them. This one's fun. So you've been with us a while, and you've been overseeing Jasper for a while. Would you have off the top of your head, historically, what's the market growth in Jasper? Like, we see like, okay, 7% this year, but like, if you look back to 10, 15 years, is that growth 2%? Is that 7%? Or is that
It's more than two.
exactly? Yeah. So what's, do you have that info?
So in 2004, our residential assessment base was, let's say, 380 million. And in 2023, we're at 1.2 billion. So even if we said 400 million in 400 million in 2005. So in an 18-year period, the market value's tripled.
Thank you for pointing out that slide. Actually, now I can do a bit of math and yeah. That's
And if I was to make that same comparison in almost any, well, not almost, in any other municipality working, it would not be that significant. In Alberta, we do, we do generally enjoy a nice 3, 4, 5% increase over time, but Jasper is more than that.
yeah, and in other Alberta communities, you're seeing a lot more
Up and downs,
you bet, right? Whereas it's trending higher always.
That's right.
Thank you. Second question, if we do go to an assessment review board hearing, what time of year would that have to be completed by?
The decision, as per the legislation, the decision of any review board hearing must be rendered prior to December 31st. Boards typically need 30 days to prepare and give that decision, so that puts us to the beginning of December at the latest. My preference is to have these scheduled as soon as we can, get it out of the way. I think your question might be, will we know what our loss is for sure before tax rates are set? Unless the tax agent gets back to me today and we talk tomorrow and it all goes away. Which is, there's a high probability that it will all go away. I just don't know how much there will be lost in assessment.
Yeah, and correct me if I'm wrong, with last year, or was it the year before, we had another large commercial one coming now, so I think it resolved itself.
Yeah, it did result.
Yeah, before any hearing.
That's right. I do know there is one residential complaint that the property owner does want to go to hear.
I think that's all for my questions right now. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Wilson. Councillor DeWolf.
Thank you very much. And I'm a big fan of colorful graphs and charts and stuff. And maybe that's what keeps us engaged. I don't know about the other communities, but I really appreciate it. So to start that off, I'd like to thank you guys for being here again. Secondly, I've experienced, and I think I said this last year, just as a resident and a potential business owner at one point when I did reach out on a few occasions, you were almost like it was like speed dial. Like when I called, the phone was answered and it was by you. So yeah, quite grateful for that. Just on the graphs itself, just referring to exempt for clarification for anybody that's looking at this for the first time or has looked at it for a while. I'm assuming those are the Parks Canada and other provincial buildings, federal and provincial buildings that we still collect tax on.
Some of Parks Canada buildings do pay a payment in lieu of tax, and that would fall under the taxable side. The exempt portions would be this building, for example, schools, churches, all those types of properties. Some Parks Canada property doesn't meet the test for taxable, so they would be exempt, but some do meet the test for taxable. An example would be the train station. There's a portion of that space that's leased out, but that's taxable.
But not the Legion. Just kidding. I don't want to single that out. That was just for fun. That was for fun. A little bit of history.
Yeah.
Okay, I appreciate that. So and then the next one was is the surveys. I know that some of them are out already in that particular zone referred to in your map there of 2024, just because I've been contacted and asked for a little bit more information on that. And I said that a lot of it will be revealed today, and it has. I guess some of the questions are, you know, like how important is that information and is it needed? Well, you answered that. And, you know, there's just some people were a little bit skeptical about whether they want to do it. And some haven't been there 5 years ago, I guess, when the last survey came out. So I would encourage doing that, you know, just to help out the overall process. I think that there are other condo associations in there or co-ops.
There are some co-ops in this year's
Right.
survey, yeah.
Yeah, so there was one in particular that was singled out, it was for the mountain co-ops. Is that just because there was one sale there and there were no other sales in the other end, like in Southview or?
My term mountain co-op, Mount Park co-op encapsulates
All of them, okay, right, okay, so, yeah, I think it's just because one has the specific name on it, and then just so for all those residents that live in those particular ones, and I'm easy pickings because I live in one of them, so it's really easy, when, hey, what's this all about?
Yeah.
How important is it to get information from every individual unit owner? Because doesn't it just get kind of an overall assessment because of
Yeah.
its particular situation?
I mean, the co-ops are a little bit unique, with regards to this survey in that an owner of a co-op property doesn't have the same ability as someone else in town to replace the roof, doors, windows, siding, and everything, right? You're somewhat limited. And we understand that. And there's only so much you can do to the inside of your home to increase the value of it. And even if you do that on a co-op, your value increase is capped based on the way that they are bought and sold. So it's for the co-ops, the reason is so that our data is current. We're at the end of the day, it doesn't matter if you're in a co-op or not in a co-op, the ultimate end number is going to be determined by the price of properties that's sold.
Sure. And then I guess the last part of that question too, if there is a collective investment, like let's say new roofs, or if there's like a whole you know, upgrade that's been done collectively, does that, regardless of, you know, the CPI that those are confined to, does that change the overall, what that building property and assessment might be worth?
So with regards to the co-ops, yes, the sales are limited by that CPI index. But I don't have the number, what that is. So I still rely on what they transferred for, knowing that the transfer price is what that CPI index say it can sell for. So in that example, if they invested several $100,000 and redid the roof and exterior and windows and doors and whatnot, if they're still limited on what they can sell for, that's still what the assessment's.
Fair enough, that's good. You know, like I think there's a little confusion by many on that, and it's nice to have that information. So I'm better equipped to answer those. So appreciate it.
Excellent.
I've got another one, but I'll leave because it refers to everything general.
Councillor Kellerman.
Thank you, Mayor Ireland, through to Mr. Burrows. So if a property is not being used like a business and it has closed and it's not being used, it's not in retail, it's not in restaurants, how do you assess that building for taxes?
So the property is, for all intents and purposes, a non-residential property,
Yes.
and it's sitting vacant. So mass appraisal. So mass appraisal means we collect as much information as we can. So let's say, for example, this property is on a Connaught. Or Patricia, let's say. And we know that rental rates in that street range between $40 and $50. Well, we would apply between $40 and $50 rental rate to that vacant space. And calculate an assessment based on the income approach. Just because they don't generate rental income doesn't mean it can't generate rental income. So it's based on what a potential purchaser would think. So for example, that property sitting there vacant and somebody comes along and says, hey, I want to put a restaurant in there, how much money? Better example would be, it's sitting vacant and somebody wants to rent that space. The property owner is gonna say, how much money can I rent it? That income is what the assessment is based on. And I get that number from the annual surveys that I send to all non-residential properties. I'm fairly comfortable with the rental rate data that I've collected in Jasper. And then at the end of it all, once I have the net operating income, it's the cap rate that gets applied, and that's the end number.
Thank you. And how are apartment buildings assessed? Like, have you assessed them like?
Apartment buildings are also based on the income approach. So it's very similar, but slightly different in that the rental income is obviously the monthly rent that's paid by the tenant in each suite. And we allow for certain vacancy over time, as we do also on the non-res side. Then we allow for some expenses, ultimately calculate a net operating income and divide that by the cap rate for apartment buildings. So cap rates for apartment buildings would be determined by sales of apartment buildings. The caps for retail restaurants will be based on sales of that property type.
Thank you.
Councillor.
Thank you, Mayor Ireland. My question is it common that the same tax agent would deal with all non-residential complaints? Is that something you see?
So, yeah, in this case, it just happens to be, they were the only agent that filed a complaint. And they happen to represent 11 properties. So, I do have another municipality where, matter of fact, the same agent filed on all of the properties that they represent in that municipality. And at the end of the day, I think their overall, the entire ask was like 6 to 8%, if you were to add it all up on all those assessments, and at the end of the day, it turned out to be 1.5% of a reduction. And it was for various reasons on various properties, but I think they filed on 30 properties, and of the 30, I would say 24 were no change. So it's not surprising that they did it, because their answer is we ran out of time, and City of Edmonton and City of Calgary always keep us busy, and we don't have time to deal with the small people. And sometimes I get pretty frustrated with them and tell them that, that's kind of a slap in the face, but it is what it is.
Mr. Bertels, if I could just follow up on a question asked by Councillor Keller. For the income approach, value is NOI divided by the applicable cap rate.
Yep.
In your world, is the N in NOI net operating income, or is it normalized?
Net.
So you indicated that for a vacant building, you would do a mass appraisal and you would determine that the market would suggest rental of say $40 or $50 a square foot, and you would project income based on that.
That's right.
Is it possible for a non-residential property for an owner who might own the property in one capacity and operate a business in a different, under a different corporate entity, to give themselves a sweetheart sublease and thereby reduce the valuation?
One of our questions on our RFI is this property owner occupied? And in that case, it's a different entity, but it is ultimately owner occupied. And it's black and white when the rent on an owner occupied property is reported as compared to a non-owner occupied property. So they're immediately kicked out of the study.
And so owner occupied would include non-arm's length.
That's right.
So you're alert to that, so
Absolutely.
that's not happening.
That's right.
Changing subjects a bit, you indicated in one of the graphs for non-residential assessments, about 190 properties, 0 to 500,000, and said that would be a reflection of private home accommodation. Correct?
Yep.
So private home accommodation is assessed as non-residential. But those assessments, I would presume, but correct me if I'm wrong, would go up, say the 7% amount reflective of residential increases rather than the 15% that is reflective of non-residential.
That is correct, yeah. So they are valued as residential single family properties. And then a portion of it is taxed commercially to account for that private home accommodation. But we've never collected or tried to collect the income information from the private home accommodations. It's our view that that data would be not overly useful.
I have one more and then I'll turn back to you, if that's all right.
Yeah, it just has to do on that residential
Go
piece,
ahead.
just because it's just. Do the houses themselves that have rental opportunities have a higher value attached to them because of
Do
that?
they sell from?
They sell them.
If you ask somebody who lives in an R1, they would say absolutely. If you ask somebody that owns an R2 or has the ability to, some would say it does, some would say it doesn't. We do review that in the marketplace, and I haven't been able to pinpoint a definite number to say it does or doesn't. So at this point, we're considering them to be.
That's fair, and I appreciate you letting me interject your worship.
My second last question. The graph that you started with, the 2022 compared to 2023 assessment. So residential as a share of the total has increased, pardon me, decreased from a 52% share by my calculation, 51, and non-residential has gone the other way. And exempt has gone up about 1% of the total. Can you say whether those proportions are reflective of the norm of other communities? Are we different in the distribution?
A little bit. We're a little bit different in that accommodation style properties in Jasper there's a lot of them. In another municipality, the income that a hotel is generating is more because of the COVID factor that we talked about, but for example, I'll give you the city of Leduc is another one of my clients, and there's a lot of hotels there. And the hotels did generate more revenue, but the hotel portion of the total of the non-res is far less significant than it is in Jasper. So when you refer to these pie charts, because the hotels are such a big part of your assessment base, that's impacting. That's the reason why the residential piece of the total pie is less this year. It's because the hotels increased by so much. So, I think in years past, we've talked a little bit about the exempt side of things. I wouldn't say Jasper has an extraordinarily large amount of exempt properties. It's not on the low side in terms of percent of the total, but it's not unrealistically more than any of our other urban clients.
Thank you for that. My last question more for administration, but council, it needs to receive the assessment report in order to proceed with the tax rate bylaw. We need some numbers. Is that accurate? Are we under a particular deadline with respect to this?
Your worship, so the presentation is really to ensure that council and community have the information. It's an overview of the facts that are collected by the assessment team. There isn't a statutory obligation for council to receive this, or in fact, I think for us to provide it. But we want to ensure that council's informed and this is transparent about what the municipality's assessment base is. So no, there's not a requirement for council to receive and approve this. It doesn't have an impact on our ability to set the tax rate or establish a tax bylaw.
And then to the extent that there is this $52 million or some portion of it that is in doubt, how we deal with that, whether high or low, will that result in either an over or an under levy?
Thank you for the question, your worship. Yes, so the discussion can be had at setting the tax rates. And whether if we do make an adjustment to the assessment, then if the assessment comes in different, then yes, we would be looking at either an over levy or an under levy, depending on which way it went, whether or not more was approved through the appeal process, or if less was went through the appeal process, then we could see then the over levy. So we have seen that in the past, and as Mr. Bertels has indicated, we've had some discussions around what we might be looking at, and we can discuss that as we're looking at the tax rates this year.
Thank you for that. Any other questions? Councillor DeMoor.
I don't have many questions, and I don't want to like preempt my notice of motion for later, but just I think where I was kind of going, and I didn't at the time want to include the gentleman from Accurate here, but Mr. Bertels made a good point about the information being out there and the opportunity to address the assessment, and then it comes in at the 11th hour, and it's like, where were you guys the whole time? And it's like, so we often face that in the community, and it's like, there's a symptom of communication, and we kind of struggle with certain initiatives in our community sometimes to get the word out there and get people engaged and just try. We can say, well, all the information's on our website. We talked about it extensively at our council meetings, and it's until they get their tax bill, that's when they get upset. And so basically, because there's going to be all these changes, I expect some feedback coming from the community. And all I wanted to say is, like, could we come up with something a little different than what we've been doing in the past to kind of get ahead of the communication that we normally do? And that's not to say that we've been failing by any point in the past, and it's not to blame administration, but if we keep getting the same thing, maybe there's a different way of looking at it. I'm not sure if other communities have done better than others, but I think there's an opportunity to get ahead of this and try to explain to people and business owners and residents alike to make them aware of some changes that might be coming down. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor DeMoor. If there are no further questions for our assessor, Mr. Bertels, any further comments or potentially a motion from any council? Councillor DeMoor.
Well, I move that council receive the presentation from Accurate Assessment Group Ltd. for information.
Thank you for that motion. Councillor DeMoor, any debate on the motion? Seeing none, I will call the question. All those in favor? There are none opposed. That is carried. So thank you again. Before you leave, Councillor Melvin.
Thank you, Your Worship, and thank you for the information. I do want to close by acknowledging that in the many years that Accurate Assessment has been working with the municipality, your company has also come back to the municipality and also has had meetings here. And we see you here periodically as a group. And on behalf of the community, I'd like to thank you as one of our suppliers that you choose to come back to us. You have many places where you can go and you can do business. But on behalf of our business community, I'd like to thank you for the businesses that you've supported in the past, and hope we'll see you back in the future.
Absolutely. Thank you very much. Great.
Thank you. Before we move to Agenda item 6, new business, is there any desire for recess? I see some nods, so it is now about 6 minutes to 3. Let's adjourn for 10 minutes, reconvene at 3:05. Thank you. Welcome back. We are now back in session and about to begin agenda item 6, new business. 6.1 IT master plan. Here, I believe with a recommendation from committee of the whole, council approval. Are there any outstanding questions from councilors to administration regarding the IT master plan, which was presented 2 weeks ago to committee of the whole? Councillor Melnick.
Thank you, Your Worship. The IT master plan was very extensive. I guess a question from myself to administration. As we are approving this master plan, or how is that, and what will that look like in the 2025 budget process? In other words, how will administration take this IT plan, and what can we anticipate in the fall?
Your Worship, through to Councillor Melnick. At this point, there will be some discussions during the budget process about the IT master plan and what it has suggested, and we will bring forward some recommendations at that time with updated figures as we have them. And given that, and we've also stated it into the request for decision that anything that goes along with this, the IT master plan, you're not necessarily committing to a dollar value as per suggested. It would be discussed every year as the budget is being discussed, and council can make adjustments to the budget at that point.
If I might just, in other budget presentations, we've had things included. And so I would anticipate that the IT items that we'll be discussing will be part of the overall budget, or will it be an add-on?
Your Worship, for Councillor Melnick. So at this time, we're still discussing what that would look like. What I would be able to say is that we would ensure that any item that is impacted by the IT master plan, or is influenced by a recommendation from the IT master plan, we would ensure that that was highlighted to council so that you can see what that impact was. Any of the capital items, we would ensure again that those are highlighted as a result of the IT master plan. I think it's likely that we would see them as included, and then clearly identified so that council can see that. In the last budget process, council received a document that had all of the notes to demonstrate, okay, where there was a change, why was, what were the things that contributed to this change, and administration identified that. We would continue this, and so I think you would see, IT master plan recommendation as one of those things with a specific dollar value attached, so the council can ask more detailed questions about those individual items.
Thank you to both Director Melanchuk and yourself, Mr. Gibbon. Thank you, Your Worship.
Thank you, Councillor Melnick. Are there any other questions for administration, or is there a councillor prepared to make a motion? Councillor Keller-Hemke.
Thank you, Mayor Arnold, and then I'll make recommendation that council approve the IT master plan that is presented.
Thank you for that motion, Councillor Keller-Hemke. Is there any debate? Councillor Demoda.
No debate. I just wanted to state that, at this point, that we're not obligating any hard financial dollars. And, it's good to have a plan to go forward and then review them at at budget time as well and look at the overall picture of what that brings to the net tax envelope and services to the community. So I like the fact that we're going forward with something. And yeah, I look forward to future discussions. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor DeMoto. Any other debate or comments? Seeing nothing, I will call the question. All those in favor? There are none opposed. That is carried. That takes us to agenda item 6.2, council representation on external boards and committees policy, again, coming to us by way of a recommendation from Committee of the Whole. Are there any outstanding questions from councillors regarding the policy as presented today? If not, is there a councillor prepared to make a motion? Councillor Melnick,
Thank you, Your Worship. I would move that council approve policy A107, council representation on external boards and committees as presented.
thank you for that motion, Councillor Melnick. Is there any debate? Or comment? Seeing nothing, I will call the question. All those in favor? There are none opposed. That is carried. Takes us to agenda item 6.3, transit service standards policy. Again, coming to us by way of recommendation from Committee of the Whole. And again, are there any outstanding questions from any councillor regarding the proposed policy? Councillor Keller-Hampy.
Thank you, Mayor Harland. I'd just like to thank administration, Mr. Gibbon, for adding the under service quality and performance for to be in line with Grand Jetta Head School Division. I think we need to add something else here. You know, even though we have a third-party operator at -30, -35, and we've seen this ourselves where it hasn't operated. And we say above that reliability target for all regular fixtures, it should be 98%. Should we have a clause in here that says we may not run if it's -30, -40? Because, you know, we have a lot of vulnerable people out there and the new app is very accurate. But what happens if somebody's phone dies or the bus breaks down, it's not coming? We don't want people standing out there at -30, -35. So should we have something in there that says we may not operate at -30, -35? I think, alert the public that, yeah, we're going to try to be 80% accurate, but under these conditions, we may not be, rather than having somebody, their phone is dead at -35, standing outside. They don't know the bus is not coming, and then they're vulnerably standing there to get hurt. And I think that if we have it in there and people think, okay, it's -30, -35, public bus may not operate. I'm just wondering if we should consider that.
Mr. Gibbon.
Thanks, Your Worship, to Councillor Keller-Hampy's point. Certainly, the council wishes to establish an operating parameter. That's absolutely right. One thing that I would say is that it would help if it was definitive. So the service shall not operate when temperatures fall below blank. That type of thing provides clear operating guidance. Inclusion of a word like may not just leaves more uncertainty and would leave more questioning, I think, on behalf of the public. So certainly if council wanted to establish an operating parameter, that would give clear direction to administration on how to operate the service. If it gets too cold past a certain point, we shut down the service. That's completely legitimate. I would say the intention of the service reliability standard of 98%. So the reliability target for all regular fixed route service shall be 98%. That implies that other than in very unusual situations, we should be running nearly 100% of the time. So, you know, there's an implication there that if it's pretty cold, very cold, if we can run, we do. So, you know, as I say, council can give whatever guidance that you'd wish to have. I think that there's an expectation that as a public service that is generally available. You certainly heard that discussion loud and clear in January of this year. And so, you know, I think from an administrative perspective, we would, our target is to run a high reliability operation as, you know, the evidence of being that 98% target. If council wished to establish a different operating parameter, absolutely, that's your right. My suggestion would be that it should be specific, you know, shall not operate when temperatures fall below blank.
Councillor Wilson.
What do other similar transit companies operate to 98% and in your research have you come across any that do shut it down at a certain temperature? Because then again, we're talking about wind chill or what temperature and, you know, have you seen it out there?
Your worship, for Councillor Wilson. So I would say that it is not common enough that I've seen it. It's possible that it exists somewhere, but I think that again, you know, as a municipal service, as a public service, the expectation is that the default is that it is running and that people can count on it. So, so I can't say that I'm familiar with other municipal transit systems that would have a similar, you know, that would have a cutoff threshold around temperature.
Councillor Hall.
Thank you, Mayor.
Did you have?
Thank you, Mayor Ireland. I'm sure I talked about this before, but I know Rome, like our down in Banff, they have a service delay policy that just says it may change without notice. And when we had that cold snap and our bus didn't run, Rome also was updating they have their own specific social media just for transit, and it was delayed and all over the place. Like, I don't think it's uncommon, but I would not want to say at -40 we shut things down. This is, I think, the most important time to have transit. When it's cold and if the buses can run, I would hope they're running.
Is it intended that there will be administrative procedures added to the policy?
Yes, your worship, that's correct.
So I wonder whether, rather than put it as part of the policy, consider that in administrative procedures, although I would be, I think, initially more inclined to favor a notice provision if we're required to shut down, rather than saying in advance, we're going to shut down at some temperature, and people might debate whether that's the temperature at that spot. And they may be out there, and if the phone is already dead, how do we get notice? So I can see benefit in providing physical notice. Something must operate at 40 below, and if we can't run a bus, maybe we should go put a sign on every bus stop so that people aren't standing there with the dead phone wondering when the bus is coming. So how would they ever know? But in any event, I think there is a place in administrative procedures rather than in laws. Councillor Dolan.
Thank you. Well, there could be other variables as well. You know, and then if we're dealing with this situation, we might not have the staff to get out and put all those things out. But at the same time, you know, I really appreciate where Councillor Keller MP was coming from. And I think maybe specifying temperatures and stuff. To temperature or even like those weather situations, there could be other situations that might prevent us from providing the service on time or with its regularity as prescribed. So, I totally feel where Mr. Given is coming from in regards to, our operational mandate is this percentage. However, I do feel that there might be some room for, issues because if we say we must run, well, if it's a certain temperature and we can't run, we can, there's two different ways of looking at that. Like we may or may not run. We might have the capability of doing that. It could be minus 45 and we have a vehicle that actually operates and we can get a run. Who knows? So by tying a temperature that say we won't run at this temperature, I don't think really helps us. But if there are opportunities, where in the future we might be able to. Thank you.
Are there other comments or questions related to the transit service standards policy in its current form? Councillor Kelly-Ramsey.
It still concerns me though, if we're gonna say that at 98% we're gonna run. And then we don't run, we have vulnerable people standing there. So then do we have something in there that our operator tries to use an alternative or use a taxi company, or if somebody gets a taxi because they need a taxi, are we gonna take care of it? Like, you know what I mean? Like, we don't want to leave people stranded. So, in here, we're saying we're gonna run at 98%. What happens if we don't? Last year there was an accident, we had to cut service, and we had to cut it when it was minus 35 this January because the bus wouldn't run. So I'm just saying, like, it's open here. We're saying we're gonna run for 98%. What if we can't? There's nothing in here that. I know it's a target, but I'm just saying it's we're setting a very high target. But, yeah, we're only running 6 months, but we did have to shut down twice. So, I'm just saying, should we have something in there?
Thank you for that, Councillor Hall.
Thank you, Mayor Ireland. If I'm understanding what you're saying, I wonder, so a couple questions. This target, does it mean that 98 out of 100 times the bus will be there? Is that what that directly means? And then my other observation or question is maybe it's around communication. Like maybe we just need to get ourselves some Facebook page or some more ways to communicate. Because yeah, I agree. I don't know that I want to put anywhere in here that at minus 40 we will not run. Like I don't want to do that, but I think maybe what you're wanting is better communication with residents.
Yeah.
But is that what that target number means?
Your worship, for Council Hall, yeah, I think that's the simplest interpretation of out of 100, operating hours, we'd be operating for 98.
Councillor Wilson.
There are more essential services than public transit, and all of those services have disruption, power, water, gas, garbage, all of them do. And 98% is pretty deadly, and I think public should expect some type of disruption on like exceptional weather days. I'm comfortable the way the wording is. Yeah. There's no 100% assurity to anything. And so, if we're trying to hit 98, well, that's pretty darn good.
Thank you, Councillor Wilson. Mr. Gibbon.
Your worship, maybe I would just add, like, with that 98% target, it is I think a high target. And I guess the implication of it is that if there's a disruption for any reason, vehicle not available for mechanical reasons, vehicle not available for, well, I suppose cold could be a subset of mechanical reasons, but, then in order for administration and the contractor to hit our reliability target, we better figure out how to get the service back on the road as soon as possible. And the policy doesn't limit us in any other ways from using any other tool at our disposal. Right. So I would say that the policy as written sets a high expectation and doesn't constrain administration from figuring out the best way to meet that high expectation. Right. If the policy said all Jasper transit vehicles must be purple. And being a bit facetious, just to, but to illustrate, I mean, we could say have appropriate Jasper transit decals. That maybe is a little bit less silly. If the policy said all fleet must have appropriate decaling before providing service, that would limit our ability. Oh, all of a sudden we've run out of fleet that have appropriate decals. Well, it's going to take 2 weeks to get another unit that has appropriate decaling. So I guess we're down for 2 weeks. You can see how that would be limited. The policy doesn't impose any of those kind of limitations. And so administration, I think, has more flexibility to look at alternate solutions. And Councillor Kelleher and we mentioned a few of the different alternatives that would be available. So again, we're setting a high expectation of ensuring that residents can rely on the service, and the policy doesn't handcuff administration in terms of what you can do to go and continue to deliver the service. And frankly, there was some lack of clarity about that in January, where we said, okay, well, we don't really have any clarity. I mean, if council had said, and again, I don't mean to make light of it, but if council had said all buses must be purple, well, gosh, that's a really big constraint. But what I'm hearing from council, over the course of the last number of months and in this policy discussion is make sure the service is reliable and figure it out. Yeah. And the policy enables that. It really does give us that ability to say, okay, we want to make sure that we're maintaining that high level of reliability. And so we need to figure out a way to get the bus back on the road so we don't leave anybody stranded.
Councillor Hall.
Thank you, Mayor Ireland. My question for administration, in the 8 months we've had this service, have we met our target?
Your worship, I don't have that number at hand. I believe that we did report it in the first quarter report, but I may be misremembering and might be thinking about the on-time performance. I would have to look to see. But so the 2 situations where we have canceled service, one in January due to cold, that service was down for the morning. So we lost the hours of morning operation that day and it was back up that afternoon. And then the other was where we had the accident, lost unit and was out of service. And I believe we're back up operating that afternoon. So I would say that we have, over the course of the operation, hit that 98% target probably pretty handily.
Councillor Watson.
I just wanted to say that I really appreciated what CAO Given spoke to, that aspiring to the 98% service level and giving them the latitude to come up with creative solutions in order to meet that is, I think, important to me, and I think is a great goal to aspire to.
I appreciate that. The policy is aspirational. It sets the goal for administration. With, and the goal in this case is 98% reliability. And typically, council sets those sorts of parameters and administration determines how they're going to achieve council's desire. I wondered whether we could add another bullet under the service quality and performance section, along the lines of standards and characteristics shall include a communication plan regarding service interruption. And then you could build, administration could build that into the operating procedures. But the important thing is, as I understand Councillor Pellegrin's point, is to make sure that we have a way of communicating, not that we're committed, always have a bus there in every circumstances, but when we can, we need to have a communication plan to let people know. And so we could add that as a service quality and performance standard and then require administration to address that. The how of that in administrative procedures.
Your worship, I think that's absolutely something that council can choose to include. My suggestion would be that maybe it's under transparency. Maybe that section of transparency is transparency and communication. But that section doesn't have any council identified specifics, and we built that into the structure of the policy. So if council wanted to add a, in addition to this, in addition to the expectations above, council specifically establishes that administration shall maintain a system capable of providing, or administration shall maintain a communications plan to inform the public of service disruptions. Or whichever wording, but my suggestion would be that it fits in under that transparency, because that's really where we talk about how we communicate to the public about the service.
And including real-time communication, not after the fact.
Recommend that council approve policy F114 transit service standards with the amendments under transparency and communication section.
And is that clear enough for administration? You proposed some wording, Mr. Glidden, so I take it you wrote it down. It's not directly included in the motion.
Well, maybe I'll just make sure that what I was thinking and hearing is what council is expecting, because this is council approving the policy as amended, and so the policy would be complete after this. Administration would make the amendment before posting. So what I would add would be to, using a similar format, that we would keep the first 4 bullet points. And then we would say, in addition to the transparency expectations above, council specifically establishes that administration shall maintain a communications plan to provide real-time information related to service disruptions. If that met what council's intent was, I've got that written down. We could make that amendment. So in terms of what you would be voting on, with amendment, that's what administration would record as.
That is exactly the motion I heard from Councillor Pellegrin. Sure. All right, any debate on that excellent motion? Councillor Hall.
No debate. I just wanted to speak to the motion and thank administration for your hard work on this policy. I'm very happy we launched transit in the fall and we had a slowish winter, which I was always comfortable with, to work these policies out and work our work transit out. And we're 8 months in and we've already come up with the policy. Like, I think that's really telling, and I think it's really, really proud of what we've done.
Councillor Demoted.
I too, and I appreciate the, those comments as well. And just being present at our open house for transit, one of the things that was my takeaway, we had various degrees of feedback, but, one of the takeaways I had is that, we had a process which is kind of like when you have a restaurant or a hotel or another business in the community, whether it's retail, you have you have a soft open, right? And that's where you iron out all the kinks and everything before your grand opening. And I think we might not have a major ribbon cutting for the summertime, but at the same time, we've ironed out a lot of things that we wouldn't necessarily have the opportunity to do to when it's super busy. And then we're still going to iron some up. We're going to, really discover what it's going to be like at peak capacity. So I really enjoyed the process so far. And I look forward to being on the other side of it and seeing the full results out of a busy season. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other debate or comment on the motion? I will then call the question. All those in favor? There are none opposed. That is carried. Joining with Councillor Hall in thanking administration for getting to this point. Agenda item 7, notices of motion. We added 7.1, maybe not formally a notice of motion, but Councillor Demota, you wanted to add something to at least a future agenda?
Yeah, and it's not to really put a motion forward on communications. I think that we might have an opportunity before the next tax invoice goes out to the community, the requisition, that we can use some of the information that we got today and down the road when we talk about when we're setting the rates to maybe try to engage the community a little more in understanding how things are rolling out and how that impacts, that's how it's going to impact their taxes this year. That's all. So I don't know if it was just kind of a loose discussion on, can we come up with some better strategies to get it out there? And if that is a notice of motion to have discussion at the next committee of the whole, so be it. And if I can come up with something in the next day, by end of the day tomorrow, I'll try to formalize something a bit more concrete.
Thank you for that, Councillor Demota. Mr. Given, did you want to respond?
Your worship, if it's maybe helpful, Councillor Demota's concern is well placed. Obviously tax notice time is a really important time for the municipality and a key piece of information that we send out to the public. Director Melnichuk and our communications manager have already started the review process of our materials from last year. We put a lot of effort in the 2023 notice year to try to improve the quality of information that was going out and the accessibility of the information that's going out. So we're looking at that to see if there's any additional updates that we can do. We also, council might remember that we put in some additional information about where your tax dollars go, so people could see it at a glance, sort of where the municipality spends its money. So we are using it as a key education tool. There are a couple of key dates, and ultimately that information can't go out until the mill rate is set and the tax bylaw is set. So we have provided people with information about their ability to dispute their assessments. Mr. Burtle's sort of highlighted, and there are some that took advantage of that opportunity. This next one will ultimately rely on having the tax rate bylaw and mill rate established so that administration can provide that information to the public after it's been approved by council.
Thank you for that, Mr. Given. Councillor Demota, you're satisfied?
That satisfies me, so that's great. And and not to take away anything from administration and our communications. I think that we've really improved in that area over the years. And I said it earlier at our legislative committee meeting, and I think there's always opportunity for improvement. And I'm not saying we're doing anything wrong, but there's it's just I think that we're just in a little bit of a temperamental time because we are still coming out of the pandemic, and even though we're in year 4 now, we're seeing even today some of the ramifications and implications of that downtime having impact on the community. And it's still going to habits effect. So I think that with everything that's going on, we've got some renos happening over here. We've got some projects starting up over there. There's a lot of discussion in the community about, you know, where and how our money is being spent. And I think that when people start getting their invoices, we're gonna have some bigger discussions. And I want to kind of prevent some of that negative stuff that might be floating around. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Demota. That takes us to agenda item 8, councillors' reports. Are there any reports? For council? Councillor Melnick?
Thank you, Your Worship. I will report on behalf of His Honor. Both of us attended a Municipality of Jasper and Parks Canada Emergency Management Agency Administration session, where we were able to sit with our partners in Parks Canada regarding emergency management, and that led into a day-long simulation, which I'm sure His Worship would be happy to comment on. Beyond that, I have one other meeting coming up later this week, and that's with the Jasper Yellowhead Historical Society.
Thank you, Councillor Melnick. Other reports? I will just add then, as members of the Emergency Advisory Committee, Councillor Melnick and I attended the session last Wednesday afternoon, which included representatives from Parks Canada and also from Alberta Emergency Management Agency, which was really helpful. The following day, as Councillor Melnick indicated, there was a simulated exercise, and I was able to attend that for about an hour. And they used a scenario of a wildfire near the whirlpool, which required the evacuation of the community. And there were a number of people representing all sorts of agencies, and again, Alberta Emergency Management playing an observing role. And I will say that the individuals from Alberta Emergency Management were highly impressed and suggested that, although we've done this before based on the use of consultants, in this case, Director Nadon and counterpart from Parks Canada orchestrated and led the entire session and did an absolutely excellent job. So it's unfortunate she is not here now, but I think there is another Emergency Preparedness Week open house that she has to be at right now, but really did an excellent job leading that simulation, and the community should get a great deal of comfort out of the fact that the group responded as well as it did, and I heard nothing but compliments from Alberta Emergency Management indicating that our community is as prepared and organized as any community could expect it to be. So credit to, in particular, to Director Nadon and her crew for pulling that off in fantastic stuff. Apart from that, I will report on behalf of the Legislative Committee that we met this morning. Significant discussion regarding the public participation aspect of our procedural bylaw and our policy on correspondence. We're continuing to work through those important details, and at some point we'll be bringing some sort of a recommendation to Committee of the Whole, but that is still a ways off. It's a monumental job going through the entire procedural bylaw clause by clause, but we're getting there, and I thought today produced some really good discussion. That is my report. If there is nothing else, there is a list of upcoming events. Give councillors a chance to review that, and if there is anything upcoming that should be brought to the attention of councillors or to the public, perhaps make that known. Councillor Hall.
Thank you, Mayor Ireland. I believe this evening at 7 PM is the first uplift party upstairs in the clock. Is it the Clock Tower Mall? 600 something, Patricia? Just for public to know.
Thank you for that. The kickoff is in fact up there, not in the Clock Tower Mall, but the Patricia Street Mall. And so, you know, painting is underway up there with the first artist whose name I've forgotten, but he was from Nelson, and if you have looked at his work on Nelson City Hall, it's quite spectacular. All right, if there is nothing else, we can move to agenda item 10, but before I call for that motion, I want to acknowledge and thank Deputy Mayor Waxer. I appreciate that you're unwell. We appreciate that you have chosen to join us by video to assure health for all, but I know it's a miserable day for you, so thank you for choosing to attend it all.
My pleasure, but I chose to be quieter today than usual, but thank you.
Well, if you're prepared, you might make a motion that we adjourn.
I'll also move.
Thank you for that. All those in favor? There are none opposed. We are adjourned. Thank you to all. Thank you to those who stuck it out in the gallery today, as has been the case recently. Thank you for that. And thank you to those who joined us online on the Zoom platform, and to those who will view this recording later on our YouTube channel. Good day to all.